because we can discuss.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, let's start this meeting of the Expenditure and Revenue Study Committee for March 4, 2026. Let's call the roll. Who's here? Dick Benka? I don't hear him. Ruth Ellen Fitz?
Paula's here.
I don't hear her. Jeff Rudolph, I see you.
I'm here for a half hour, but I'm here.
So Joe Modigliani, I think still away. Janet Gelbart,
Here.
Sadaf Academy.
Here.
Mariah Nobrega.
She's on screen.
Here, I'm here.
John Dogger.
Here.
John Van Scoyet.
Here.
Lucy Hefter.
He told me he's coming, so he may be a little late.
Okay, Cliff Brown.
Here.
Okay, let's get going then. I'm here also, so. We have a quorum among other things. So let me remind everyone that we have a lot of work to pack into a relatively small amount of time. So let's make sure that our comments and questions are focused and that we don't take up more time than is necessary to make your point or add important information to the discussion. I assume everyone has read the voluminous materials for today's meeting and are prepared to state their suggestions for improvements, corrections, or disagreements concisely. We go on, Sadaf and Cliff, you agreed to write the executive summary. You sort of update where you are, because that's the important part, the most important part maybe of this report. And if that is going well, I think we're really in a good place to complete this report in time.
Yeah, so
Bernard, it's John. Do you mind if I ask, there's a beep item on the agenda ahead of the executive summary?
The executive summary is for the
it's just a question about the overall report, John, not the town agenda item. So I can give a quick update, and I know Jeff needs to drop soon. So Cliff and I have been discussing and iterating on the executive summary. We are on the agenda for Monday, basically for the next session of the full committee meeting, and I think we're on track to have a solid version for people to react to by then. Cliff, do you have anything to add, or hopefully you don't disagree with my
yeah, we're gonna obviously do our best efforts. I will say that I think some of the stuff that's in the town subcommittee report actually belongs up in the executive summary and in a broader discussion than coming directly from the town subcommittee. But that's, you'll see some of that pulled up in whatever we do.
Okay, great. A quick update. Let's move on to discussion and possible votes on remaining school subcommittee reports. And remember, each report has 15 minutes, and we're going to try to get through them quickly, but sufficiently. So I think the first thing is beat draft.
Yeah, I can do that one.
Okay.
Thanks, Bernard. I'm gonna just pull open the doc that I believe is posted. Let me just grab that and make it a little cleaner. Oops. Don't need that. All right, share screen. All right, can everybody see that?
Needs to be larger.
Is that
Thank
better?
And don't you want to start at the beginning with your summary?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just trying to get all this junk off of my screen so that I can see what I wrote. Okay. Everybody can see it. It's big enough? Yes?
That's fine.
Okay, great. So I'll try to be brief and keep it at a high level, but certainly happy to answer questions and dig into stuff. So essentially, I'm going to just read the summary word for word, and then I'll just give more of an exec summary on each of the sections. So based on the analysis of the BEEP full day and extended day programs, their costs and revenues, and comparable public and private preschool programs presented in this document. It is the subcommittee's recommendation that the school committee and the PSB deeply review the tuition being charged for both full and extended day programs, as there are programs that are offered for less than market rates, as well as programs being offered for less than the cost of the program itself. In addition, it's the subcommittee's recommendation that the school committee and PSB raise the tuition charge for BEEP extended day to cover the costs or to find a less expensive way of providing services. And obviously, a lot of that detail is in the report itself, but that's the meat and the summary of this section. So there is a few paragraphs talking about the background of BEEP. It's been around since 1972, and it is located in 24 classrooms across 7 different locations in Brookline. There are 4 preschool, which would be children, 2 year and 9 months old to 3 year and 2 months. And then 20 classrooms that are pre-K, essentially, for kids that are 3 to 5. There is quite a bit of information on both the BEEP website, the BEEP handbook, and the PSB budget book that talk about some of the philosophy. It's actually pretty cool. It was founded in collaboration with Children's Hospital as a research project to try to understand quality components, or the components of high quality education. And it's also what we refer to as an inclusive program. So there are students with disabilities in the program. There are state law regulations that essentially will define what inclusionary settings require, as far as having students with disabilities in the same classroom as students without disabilities. And there's some language in here that talks about what those ratios are. So essentially, the punchline of that is that we have students with disabilities and students without disabilities in BEEP. We essentially wouldn't do it without both. But then once we've hit the ratio, so if there are 10 or 20 students with disabilities in the program, there need to be students without disabilities. But once that ratio has been met, we could and do offer open seats to students without disabilities in the rest of the locations on top of that. So the total number of students, which varies from year to year, has been in the 250s. Actually, let me make sure I got that right. Yeah. And that number can go up or down once we've met those requirements. There is tuition charged for students that essentially come into the program in that capacity. There are some financial aid programs available. It's the same as the financial aid used by the town for everything that we do in the PSB space, which again is all documented on the various websites. Enrollment. So I kind of talked a little bit about this. This enrollment chart is extended a little bit. The single number and also number per location is listed in the budget book. I broke out, with the help of a memo from Dr. Givens, some of the pieces of who's on IEPs, or number of students on IEPs, number of students with financial aid, number of students paying tuition, and that number we'll use later in some of the calculus. But this kind of gives a view from school year 21-22 up through essentially last year. I don't have the broken out data for this year. We do have the total enrollment number and by location, but just not the breakout that you see here. But that gives the reader, if you will, a basic understanding of who's there, how many students are paying tuition, how many students are on financial aid. This is the chart I was just mentioning that break it out. And this I actually pulled this has this year's breakout and total enrollment. The 286 number, I'm going back and forth to make sure that that's right. It's been different in a couple places, and I'll talk a little bit about the caveats on this report in a later section, but keep that one in mind because we'll come back to it. But this gives everyone an idea of where all of the students are and the change from year to year. So from an enrollment standpoint, that adds on to the background of what the program was. The next section goes into comparable costs. And essentially, through a lot of data gathering and tweaking and questions asked, what I did was I pulled everything into this chart that talks about essentially how much it costs to go to BEEP, plus how much it costs to go to some comparable schools that are in the area. And essentially, this shows you, if you look at the green number, which is actually last year's tuition, which I'll double check if we want to upgrade that to I'm sorry, that's correct for this year. That's 25-26. Is it that 16,740? And then you can see some of the comps: Apple Orchard School, Little Children's Center, at the higher per year tuition rate in the red here. The right side of this chart, I tried to break this all out into cost per hour, which is a little bit strange because obviously you don't pay per hour, you pay per year or pay per month. But at the end of the day, trying to do an apples to apples comparison, not all of the programs offered have the same hours. So if you try to compare them directly, sometimes it looks a little off. For instance, the Apple Orchard School is really only a morning program. So the right side gives you more of that, hour per hour comparison. But as we talked about in the subcommittee, you don't pay per hour. So it's just a caveat to keep in mind when looking at that. This piece is exactly what I was just talking about, with some of the caveats of not all the hours are the same, not all the months are the same, and that sort of thing. I'm going to skip over that piece. This next block, what I did was I went through to come up with essentially a cost of operation, a cost per student, if you will. This is the piece where I wanted to mention some of the caveats. So there's information broken out in the budget book that talk about how much we're paying for staff, which includes teachers and paras, how much some of the smaller items, books and that sort of thing cost. And what I did was I took all of that and I ran it through essentially a calculation, and you can see the line items in here, how much it costs per student, and then taking the number of students, we could essentially estimate, again, big asterisk on estimating here, how much it costs per student. There were a couple different values for the budget for 25-26. There's actually a third value in the 26-27 budget book. That's why you see the 3.84 and also the 4.3. I went with the 4.3 at the time that I wrote this because it was the most up-to-date value that I had. Also trying to just double check that number is correct. And as I mentioned earlier, the 286 was the number that I ran through everything. That number has also been updated in the 26-27 book. I've been chatting with the principal of BEEP to find out what the actual number is. And of course, the number changes from time to time, as all student classrooms do, with people who show up in the middle of the year, people who leave. But at the end of the day, with those assumptions, that is what we used, or I should say I used, to come up with these calculations, which essentially are showing that today it's costing us more per student than we're charging. Over the next 2 years, the school committee has already voted to increase the tuition at BEEP by 8% per year. And so that's this 18,000 and then 19,526 number. I have put in, again, an estimate of if the costs go up by 5% per year, which obviously if that number is higher or lower, it would change the calculations. essentially shows that we're sort of catching up, if you will, to parity, to say the cost per student will match what we're charging. And by 27, 28, it actually comes out to be $200 over the cost. But again, there's a lot of assumptions in those numbers, and that's all what's in the report. But that section in there does that sort of comparison of what we're charging to what it costs. And then the final.
Okay. Quick.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
Go ahead.
No, I want to try to wrap it up so people have time for questions.
Yeah, sorry. This is the last little chunk here. In fact, yeah. So Beep switched from a half a day program to a full day program 2 years ago. This section compares essentially what that operation looked like then to what it looks like now. I'll skip over some of the language in the middle. Essentially, when it first went to full day, the math shows it should have been a little bit more expensive tuition wise, which is what we're seeing in the middle. But then the final piece on the extended day program, which I had referenced up at the top, we had the exact costs that came from Dr. Givens, and essentially same kind of idea that we've seen earlier. Today we're not charging enough based on the cost. The tuition is going to go up over the next 2 years to $11,000 and then $13,000, which we would then again catch up with the cost of the program. However, that's assuming that the cost doesn't change. Cost most likely will change. I didn't estimate that. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. So that is it. That is the whole report, and happy to chat through it, answer questions, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, could you take down your report so I can see who's here and who's raising their hand?
I can stop sharing, sure. If
Okay,
that's
Jack,
Yeah, so just some clarification.
yeah.
The only people, the only charges are to students who do not have disabilities, is that correct? Because we're required by law to cover, or is that changed? That's one question. And the other is your comparison that you did to other inclusive programs?
Mhm.
Because we provide support for people who can't pay full tuition, and this is a revolving fund, so that if there are overages, they can be carried forward to other programs, because we're not allowed to profit on things. So is this a revolving fund? Those are my 3 questions.
Yeah, so there's both actually. There's a couple different components. There's a general fund line item that essentially pays for the inclusionary program. There's the revolving fund portion that covers the tuition that you were just mentioning, Janet, where the students that are on top of the inclusionary program essentially pay the tuition. It comes into the revolver and then is used year over year. What was the question about the comps? Sorry, I forgot that one. I think it's the second question.
Just want to make sure when you say inclusionary, you mean the kids who have disabilities, require special services, special needs, whatever. That's the inclusionary portion?
That's the inclusionary portion, yes.
Other question were your comparisons to other inclusionary programs? Because I would expect if they're not, that those costs would be higher, or that those fees would be higher. If it's just, I need to put my kid in some sort of a program and I'm choosing this one, and there's no special stuff that's happening, it's just me liking this program versus something else. So are your comparators also inclusionary is the question?
Oh, that's a great question. So like would Clinton Path Preschool or Apple Orchard School have inclusionary? I believe they are required to by law if.
Can I chime in, Jeff? Would that be helpful?
Please go
Thank
for it.
you. Okay, so they are required by law, as Jeff said, to provide accommodations to students. However, they are not inclusionary classrooms in that they are not created by design to bring a combination of students with additional needs and students who are neurotypical or typically developing students. So it's a different model altogether.
Yeah, that's what I thought, which might account for some of the differences in tuition. I fully support that whatever is charged needs to cover the costs to provide the service, but that would seem to be in the revolving fund piece, correct?
Special education costs are covered by the district. Special education costs are required, are a obligation of the education, the district to fund and provide. And so those are not covered in the revolving funds. Those are covered by the district budget.
Yeah,
Right, that's
That
what I
is
was saying.
Oh, okay,
revolving-
sorry. No, the revolving
tuition.
fund, sorry, go ahead.
The revolving fund covers the tuition paying people, correct? Who are the people who are not required to be covered, who are the typically developing kids is usually what we call them, but we don't
Yes.
have to dwell on this. I think I understand what you're saying. And I agree that you need to be able to cover the cost of the program within that revolving fund for the kids who don't need the additional services that we have to pay for out of our budget. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions? Sorry, you had something to say, Jeff?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Any other questions? John, sorry.
Hi, thanks. Jeff, nice job on this report.
Thank you.
It's certainly very thorough, and I appreciate that. My question is this: are there any savings that flow through, i.e., get around or come out of the revolving fund, which is kind of neutral in pluses and minuses because it's self-funding? So the only issue there is, are there any savings because the general fund may be, and I don't know, may be used to top the revolving fund up? And so in other words, identify any savings, and if there are any savings, have they been included in the school's ask as a potential efficiency?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is I don't know. We had a couple discussions about the revolver and what it looked like, and how much does it grow or shrink each year, and that sort of thing. But we didn't get to a point where there was enough that I could pull out to put into the report along those lines. That was certainly something that we did chat on, but it just didn't have enough to make it into the report.
Okay, any other questions? John, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just going to come back if I may. Thank you, Jeff.
Sure.
I'm wondering what we can do with this in terms of applying it either to savings, really, and it's really on the school side too. And it sounds like the school committee has already taken action, as you've described, to bring the costs into line with the revenues. Sorry, is the revenues in line with the costs? Excuse me. So that's definitely a savings, but it's kind of within the revolving fund, so it doesn't really have any impact on the general fund, which is what our main concern is.
Yeah, so 100% agree. We had many discussions in the subcommittee around this sort of concept of, we don't have a lot of programs in PSB that are businesses, right? And effectively, the tuition side of this is a business, right? We've got a program that we can offer, and we could bring in more students, and we could charge for it. We kind of went around and around from a mission side and just a practicality side. How much capacity do we have? Could we bring in, 30 more students? Do we want to make a profit? And even saying profit generated more discussion. Like, that's probably not how we want to think about it. But I agree with you in that, yes, the school committee has already put into place increases in both tuition for BEEP full day and also BEEP extended day. Probably the only piece that I would add would be, given the increases in costs that we've been talking about, particularly healthcare costs in the next couple of years, if the estimates of what our costs will be go up higher than what we use to come up with those tuition increases, are we going to be, further in the hole, or is that going to be covered? So again, it's not, I know where you're going, but that particular one, there was nothing else to get here out of BEEP in that space.
Thank you. Just one final question, if I may. Do the costs include the cost of the bricks and mortar? Is there a rental, whatever number in there or is it just salaries and materials?
I believe that is the classroom capacity line item of the budget. That is not included in the analysis. The operating costs, the revolving piece, and then the benefits were included. So there's a memo in one of the footnotes that's it ends with BEEP update. That one talks about those other line items. If you want to check that out, and certainly if there's more info we want to look at, we can talk about it.
Thank you.
Sure.
Apologies, I need to go to a work meeting, so I'm going to hang up and I'll try to come back later.
Okay, thanks, Tom.
Good.
Okay, what do we want to do with this report? Doesn't seem to impact the general fund that much, so. But is that relevant? Dick, you have your hand up?
Charlie, can
Dick?
you make Dick a co-host? He needs to be promoted.
Yes, thank you, Melissa. I'm going to promote you now, Dick. I didn't notice he had joined the meeting. Somebody must have let him in. It helps if I can do that, so that I can see when committee members are joining. So folks who have co-hosts, please let the person running the meeting do that.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I wasn't raising my hand. I was waving my hands. So no comment. I just wanted to have the camera and mic enabled, and thank you very much.
And I think we're going to lose Jeff in just a minute, so just FYI.
So Cliff, you?
Yeah. So I just wanted to follow up on John's comments and questions. The concept of adding depreciation or debt service or whatever to the revolving fund costs that could be passed on or recouped through tuition is certainly something that was discussed. I don't know that it got into our final document, but certainly worthwhile considering adding that if that was where you were driving with respect to your question. I'm also, Jeff, maybe you know the answer to this question. When were those tuition increases actually voted on by the school committee? I don't recall, because I thought they were after we sort of started analyzing this.
I thought it was very recent. I think it was in the fall, but
Yeah.
I'd have to get Mariah to. I think it was very recent, like it was in the last 6 months.
Yeah, I think it was sort of more or less, I won't say at the same time, but certainly along the time that we were analyzing this and asking John the questions that you were asking, so it dovetailed sort of nicely, if you will. So.
Okay, are we ready to vote on this? Do we want to vote? What's your desire, Jeff?
Yeah, I would definitely move to take a vote on this.
Maybe with the addition that Cliff mentioned.
Or John, if there's specific language you would like to add?
Sure.
Yeah, I think we should see if we can recoup costs such as you've just described there, Cliff and Jeff, as part of the cost save. That would be a real cost saving. So in other words, we could get it into that carried as a cost to the so the revolving fund will pay for that. And otherwise, you can't make a profit, unfortunately, on any activity that the town that's forbidden. But so yes, I think that's one way around, or certainly getting some efficiencies out of it. and it may just be an administrative accounting to do that and get the obviously it does impact revenue because it's going to eat away at it. But if we are making a profit, then that would be and we're missing cost items that we could charge for, then that would be an opportunity.
I will,
So can I make a suggestion? Can we maybe vote the a document as is with the proviso that Jeff or Sadaf or myself, work with Melissa in terms of incorporating the appropriate sort of language that would enable us to do as much as we're legally allowed to with respect to cost recovery.
I believe the language, at least what's used in the rec fund, is fully allocated costs, that they should seek to make sure the fully allocated costs are included. But I have no problems voting with what you just said.
Okay, so let's vote on the report as written with the understanding that Jeff will work on including so-called fully allocated costs as in the report, as a proposal in the report. So all in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Dick Binka.
Aye.
The Jeff Rudolph,
Yes.
Janet Gelbart,
Yes,
Sadaf Cosby,
Yes.
let's see, John Doggett,
Yes.
and Cliff, no, John's here. Okay, and it passes.
May I very quickly before we move on to a next substantive item, with regard to the non-resident student special education, Jesse Hefter caught a couple of typos that I had missed, and I will send on a revision that cleans those up in Word to Nicole or whoever you would like me to send it to. Among other things, I use the word paralegal instead of paraprofessional, going back to my prior career and not catching that. So thank you, Jess, for your sharp eyes.
could those be considered scrivener's adjustments so we don't have to read and vote?
No, I don't think you have to. Yeah, those would be scrivener's adjustment. The word has appeared twice also in a sentence. So I'll with everybody's permission, I'll just clean that up and send that.
Sounds good.
No problem. Yes, let's do it.
I'm also going to drop off now to do some work stuff as well. I'll try to come back if I can, but it's unlikely. But thank you all, and appreciate the time.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Stuart.
Thank you.
Okay, what's next on the school subcommittee report?
That was it for our section today. The CLA document, I think we'll need to wait till next week. And that's the only outstanding item for us. Actually, we have one other thing, but that'll have to wait till next week as well.
What's that?
It's the school temperatures
Oh,
adjustment for utility cost savings.
okay. Okay, then let's move on to item 3, or topic 3, discussion and possible votes on town subcommittee reports. So let's start off, excuse me, with the executive summary. Someone want to present that, which sort of pulls everything together, I think in a good way. Who's volunteering?
John wrote it. I don't know.
Yeah, Mr.
Wants
Yeah,
to
I was just able to get in as a panelist. They had me in as visitor. So I think John pulled most of it together for our town subcommittee. And if he's willing to, you could drive us through it there, John.
Okay.
Sure, I can try that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see. The goal, I mean, I have to confess that I did use AI as part of the process. In fact, I used 2 AI engines to see what we could get, and then melded the 2 together. Hopefully, the seams are seamless. So the key cut, I think the argument starts off in our executive summary concerning key cost drivers, which are listed there in fair detail, but it's sufficiently at a high level for the executive summary. I think that works. I think I wanted to make sure one of the changes that the draft that I received from Janet, and mainly I think the others that have contributed, but mainly Janet's work, there's a piece about debt service, and it's a little tricky, this one, because clearly the voters have voted for it. And kind of so therefore they are directly responsible for that number, although they don't probably fully understand what that number is, and it's quite large at this point. It's up to about 10% of the tax levy. So I think it's an important point to get across to the voters, anyone that's going to read this. Obviously, I think the select board, who is the main audience for this, is going to understand the subtleties of this. But the net is, we all pay in our taxes for that debt service, and so when our taxes go up, which they inevitably seem to do, that is debt service is a major factor there. So inflation, yeah, that's a general point. Maybe we could put some numbers in there. I'm just looking at it now, thinking, well, maybe like well, what is the inflation rate? Probably 3 or 4%, but maybe we should include that. Then the revenue constraints, as we're all familiar with, the Prop 2.5 is our main concern, and slowing new development is certainly we've been not lucky, perhaps is not the right word, but we've sort of taken advantage of the building spree that has been going on, and revenue, just like building permits, for example, have been quite they run into the millions on a normal year, but they've been slowing down, and slowing new development is a piece of that. Of course, the declining cannabis, everyone says, well, what about the cannabis? Do we get money from that? And the answer is it's declining, and I think down to a fairly low level of action. Expiration of ARPA funds and potential loss of federal grants, two aspects of federal government funding which have impacted us. And therefore, we either need to make up the whole for ARPA or the federal grants, for that matter, depending on what they're for. We then step right into the override proposal, which is 5.31 million, as currently given to us by the town, and that's about 1.6% of the increased tax levy, although I think that needs a little bit more in terms of how it impacts the average property in the town, and I think that is covered in the customers, which the Cliff I think had worked on, and maybe Dick, you were involved with as well, so that needs to be incorporated, I think, in the main discussion. The override, let me tell you one point that has been, I'm going to skip to the B for this. I think we were in the subcommittee, we all agreed on this except one thing, and that is there is a line item that is, let me see if I can skip to it. If I don't, it's not in the summary. Let me just bring it to the table because it's part of the 5.31. If you go into the main report, that the 5.31 consists of
It's on page 19, John, page 19.
19 of the town
of
draft
the full, 3B town draft report.
Let me get
page
down
19
there.
in the center. Yeah,
Thank
for
you.
people.
Thank you.
Of course.
I've got it up here on my other machine. So if you just bear with me, I'll just pull it up so I can. Here it is. So it's a chart in yellow on page 19, as Jesse has pointed out. Proposed municipal department overrides, and there's a list there. Multiple continuity of service, the baseline, fire, DPW, and I'll come back to that in a second. Police, council on aging, building, IT, and the clerk. All have sort of are planned around getting those help from the override, which totals 5.3. The issue that has been as yet unresolved fully is that the committee feels that roadways and sidewalk improvements should be featured in this list. A couple of reasons for that. If you talk to anybody in the finances, the first thing they usually mention is that pothole in front of my house, or the roadways up Chestnut Avenue are appalling, or whatever it is. But there's always a comment about, and it's top of mind because everybody walks on the street or drives on the street, or every day pretty much. So it's on top of mind. And the thinking of the subcommittee is we need to reflect that in the ask here of the voters that we're doing, 5.3 million. At the moment, what we've done is to take the DPW line item, which was originally, if you looked at the red line copy, was originally a sustainability, tree protection, and I'm missing the third one on my memory. So there's a third one there, which I'll get to. But anyway, so for the purpose of getting it done, we left that roadways and sidewalk improvement, 625,000. May or may not be the right number. I know that Chaz was going to do some more work in this area to see what he could do to get it in the list. And it may affect other items on this list, for example, because I think the general feeling is we don't want to exceed the 5.31 number. So therefore that was one, but there are a lot of pros and cons. And also we needed some additional information on actually linear feet of paving over the years and potholes over the years, so that we can see what kind of problem we're dealing with and what kind of money is necessary. At the moment, that's just a convenient guess, if you will, a placeholder. Take it like that. So this report is incomplete regarding that item, and there may be other perhaps minor edits that just for clarity that need to be put in. But I think the meat issue there, the main issue, is what to do with roadways and sidewalks, and how should they be depicted and shown as part of the departmental override. Then just finishing up here, I think the structure is shown here in terms of FY27, the 3-year structure of the cost to be raised. And let me see. I think let me just stop there and see if there are any questions we have on that. No, not have a discussion as the direction. And because what I'd like to do is to take comments on any, and whether it's now or by email, improvements or changes that we'd like to make, so that I can incorporate those.
Okay, any discussion?
I have a question.
Okay, who's that? Sarah?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you talk through the fire company piece? It's very ambiguous in this sort of, in your summary, it's a possible temporary closure. It wasn't much clearer in the full document. It's dealt with way at the end of that full document. So, one thing that I might recommend is to sort of pull that, pull some of that up. It seems it's just a little bit unclear, although it does seem to have been a talking point around the fire station or the fire company. Can you elaborate on what the situation is there? I have other questions as well, but would love to start with that.
So now you raise a very good point. It's a little bit of an embarrassment, I would say. The reason is this, that the fire overtime has come out of the reserve fund over the past 2 years or 3 years. I'm not sure Charlie will know what the numbers are. And I think there was a general desire not to do that because it really did not come under the rubric of the reserve for a reserve fund transfer, that it has to be an emergency and unforeseen, et cetera, et cetera. So the goal here is to clean up the accounting, but it's a big hole. It's a $900,000 hole that has to be cleaned up, and that's why it's there. And that's a little bit of background on why it's a tricky subject. So yes, it could definitely, I'm sure it could use improvement, and certainly that you've highlighted very well. And I think that's, I won't suggest what the improvement might be, but to take it under advisement to write some, look at that point as how it's being presented, and see if we can make it a little clearer. But I guess there is a clarity issue as how clear do we want to be, because it is the cost of coming clean, if you will. The counting should not really have been done like that. It's a fact, water over the dam. So we just need to perhaps be a little bit more precise about that, maybe a bit more forthcoming even.
If I might add to that, we included, and I'm not sure if it carried over, all the documentation that Charlie Young has done over the years about the overtime issue. It's been fully discussed with the fire department, but his emails maybe provide more of that information. It's basically saying, I think there were a lot of changes that affected overtime, and the remaining issue is it in some ways being abused, and some of it was tried to be addressed in their recent contract. So it was fully discussed with advisory. It probably got discussed at town meeting when the contract was approved. Not sure what other clarity, is it just the overtime you're questioning, or also the tail end 900,000? That's in the contract for 2 additional steps. Is that part of your question, or just the overtime?
I mean, my question was that it is dealt with in a really ambiguous fashion, and so can we clarify what is really at risk, and a little bit about tying that together more clearly, and then pulling that punchline up, because otherwise the lead is buried, I would say, on that particular item. And it is something that is important to people. I think that's probably not a surprise to people on this call, but just given the importance, as well as the how it's handled. So those are my 2 pieces of feedback.
Discussion at the time with town members, town residents, was in order to afford this. The discussion was around changing the manning on apparatus. It's 4. The town had proposed flexibility in being able to use it to just here and there make it 3 men in order to accommodate days when no one was there. That didn't happen. That was a decision, I would assume, of the select board when they were negotiating the contract. So when that fell off the page, the alternative is we're either going to have to close a company, is that an engine, or if the override doesn't pass to fund the tail end of the contract, then potentially fire station, because the only way it will be fundable. That's explained in detail in Chaz's override presentation. So maybe the thing to do, John, is to pull more of that into our report. I guess by the time I got there, I had heard it so many times, I thought it was self-explanatory.
Yeah. All right. So the other comment that I have, thank you, John and Janet. The other sort of major comment I have is on the override structure section on page 18. You reference the Arlington model, which people don't know what that is. So I think you have to explain what the Arlington model is, and then this entire approach of the front loading of the funds. I think it requires more explanation. Even the way that this is written, the FY 27, 28, 29, this is how the funds are being used, not how the funds are being collected. And that's a little bit unclear. And then, in the section that comes right below it, the details of the request, I think maybe a table would be beneficial there to show what's actually happening, because people are not familiar with the Arlington model. This is a new approach that is being proposed. So if that is it warrants more explanation and discussion. I think I
Yeah.
think people on this committee are grappling with it a little bit, and the average person is not gonna get that. I'll also say that in the context of the broader discussion that we're having as a subcommittee, this will be something that we discuss and debate. And so this is, how it's been proposed, and I think I understand why, but I assume that this will also come to the broad committee for.
That's the piece we didn't get to discuss yet. So as of when I walked into this meeting, I think we were scheduled to meet tomorrow to both review the piece around, can we put something in for the roads, and to talk about this. Not clear to me now if that meeting is still going on, because we walked into the meeting while we're in the middle of the discussion.
Okay.
Okay.
Chaz?
Dick and Cliff have their hands up before me, sorry.
Okay, heads up, maybe you had some of that.
I do want to talk about a couple of these things, but I think maybe if we get everyone's questions, I can try.
Dick?
Yes, thank you very much. Janet alluded to the tail on the fire contract. So that is one issue. My understanding is that the 4 versus 3 is not a contractual provision. And Chaz, you may address that, I think, in this context, that that is an option, perhaps other than closing a company or reducing a company. And then I have comments on other things, but while we're on the fire issue, I thought I would bring that up.
Sure. Why don't maybe I'll just talk about fire, and then we can talk about DPW.
Okay.
So yeah, working backwards here. Yes, to answer Dick's question. Well, let's if you're talking to our lawyers, yes. If you're talking to the lawyers, absolutely not. That was the big crux of this fight, and the union, you'll recall, filed an unfair labor practice charge against us and said, you guys absolutely don't have the right to do that. We think we're on solid legal footing to make the argument that the chief has absolute operational authority about who to call to work, on how to staff, and the shortages that he faces on any given day. The union disagrees with that. The union says for to an apparatus, that's it. That would have to be, as part of the agreement that ultimately settled this contract, we agreed that we would not dispute that issue throughout throughout the course of that contract, which will end in FY27. So FY28, that issue is a live issue again. With that said, we went through that process, and I think it was a process that played out very robustly in the public, and the feedback we got from advisory, the feedback that we got from town meeting, it was very clear. Don't do it. And so, is it an option? Yes. Would I do that rather than close a company? Yes, absolutely. I do not want to be laying off firefighters. I think that's much less safe than altering the minimum staffing requirements. But you're left, the question is, what is the will of the community? And so I think, we would take a hard look at it and any options, if we were to face that. And that's why I've been reluctant. I don't think I want to be cautious in going out there and saying, you must pass this override or we're going to fire firefighters. Like, I don't think that's the right message. We are trying to avoid that outcome, however possible. But $910,000 is $910,000. That's bigger than some whole departments. I keep saying this, I don't see where else to go if staffing is off the table again. So I think we would have to revisit that discussion with the union and revisit that discussion with the community. But I would anticipate that their response would be similar to last time, which would be to say, you absolutely don't have that authority, and to take us to court over it.
Yeah, I guess my thought is that the 3-man manning was not proposed as a year-round 24/7 365 day a year solution to a problem, but rather an option that was available in the event that individuals did not show up as expected on a particular day.
Correct.
And the community and the union, and I'm not speaking for anybody here, but if the alternative is laying off firefighters and reducing a company, the adjustment to minimum manning might be something that would be preferable in everybody's eyes to that more draconian solution.
I really hope so.
I would just point out, Dick, that some of the research I did was looking at the town meeting vote on this contract, and it was pointed out there that the union was aware that this was the alternative. If the funds weren't there, we might have to look at that. And they sort of said, fine, I can find it in the combined reports, but that line is there. So it's almost, I think we're almost at a who's calling who's bluff. I think it's really bad. I'm very concerned if no override passes as to what the ramifications would be for the town.
Okay, Cliff?
Thanks, Bernard. This is a great report, and I'm jealous at the amount of detail that you guys were able to obtain, and certainly the back and forth that you no doubt had with staff. But I want to make a suggestion, and I sort of alluded to this maybe a week or two ago. I would recommend, I don't have a vote, so it's like I'm just giving you some thoughts here. I would recommend that any discussion about an override structure, as well as that belongs up in the executive summary as it relates to recommendations going to the select board. And that's where explanations about that should come in, as opposed to specifically in the town section or in the school section or additionally in the school section. I just think it's more of a global type of thing. I also would recommend for those of you who are going to be voting these overall reports, that it'd be great to have the requests and the detail and information behind the requests in the reports, but having individual groups recommend sums for the pieces of the puzzle that they've studied, as opposed to bringing the requests up top to the entire committee for discussion in the context of structure and capacity to pay, I think runs the risk of being perceived as setting groups against each other. And I would just recommend that people try to avoid that.
Cliff, can you be more specific? Because the way I don't know if you're referring to the changes that are being discussed about the items within the request.
No, I'm not. So not that at all. Not that at all. It's more like the last 2 pages of the report that actually sort of like, here's our recommendation, which, you have all the information, what the request is, and that sort of like comes up to the group, as well as a discussion about structure, because that's going to be really complicated. And I do think that clearly belongs up top, as opposed to in individual sections of the report.
Yeah, I agree. The schools have tackled things that I would have also put up there. I just thought, because I'm the one who drafted it, which is why I'm talking, that the committee was expecting us to say something. But if we leave that aside, because that can just come out altogether, in the chart, which we're still discussing, is that where you said it should have been left as the town proposed it? Because originally, that's what I had with a paragraph that said, we are discussing some way to fund roads.
Well, yeah, whatever the town decides to do in terms of making a request,
Uh-huh.
that's going to be coming from the town, right? And that's going to be something that's going to be part of their request, just like the schools are making a request.
So I'm asking because that's how I originally structured it. That's all.
Yeah, let me say it differently. I don't expect the school subcommittee to be within our report, to be going line by line and making judgments as to what should be included and what not. We're gonna bring the school request to the full committee.
Hey, Chaz, did you have to add to this?
Yeah, I think, I understand Cliff's position on this. I think it's helpful to have that conversation at the subcommittee level, knowing that ultimately it's the committee and the select board that make the final decision. This kind of outstanding issue with DPW, just to briefly talk about that, I've talked to the commissioner, and we're struggling to get the data to the subcommittee, and I apologize that it's taken so long, but the snow and ice season just has been unrelenting, and the people who are in charge of the data the subcommittee wants are also the people in charge of emergency response. And so we've been doing our best to compile that. We will have it for the subcommittee in advance of their next discussion about this. With that said, there are two central issues from the commissioner's perspective. One is sustainability has been a really big success story. It is a money maker for the town. It is taking on things that the community wants us to do, like solar power, that we will not have the capacity to do absent supporting that division once its grant expires. The cost of doing that portion of the $625,000, we've budgeted $325,000 for it. So if you were to try, and one suggestion I might have is, if you wanted to see roadways within this, that you might consider leaving sustainability in and taking the other two unfunded mandates of DPW out, which is tree protection and the horticultural specialists. I think that would require a conversation with town meeting about the revised tree protection bylaw, that passed very overwhelmingly at town meeting, which is why it's in this proposal. The community wants it. It costs money. So we're asking for the money to be able to do that. If it's ultimately the recommendation of this committee, this full committee, that town meeting take a second look at that and judge whether or not it's a good use of our funds, okay, that's a different conversation. We were upfront when town meeting talked about this, about what the cost of implementing it was. And so if this committee thinks that that's not a wise use of our funds, our limited funding under this time, and it should rather go to roadways, as with the horticultural specialist, okay, then I think that's $300,000 that could go to roadways and sidewalks.
Can I
But
just ask a question, Chaz, there for a second? On what you're saying, Chaz?
Yeah.
The $325,000 is such a tiny percentage of what transportation is asking for. So one thing, I have two questions. One is, what is the 2027 DPW roads, infrastructure, pavement replacement, simple painting budget for FY27? This 325,000 is nowhere near it. I mean, the overall 2 or 3 years is $12 million. It's $1.50 per square yard. It's $2 million just for Chestnut Hill Avenue. So these numbers are like ridiculously small compared to the actual need. And so my question, the question sort of devolves the following way. If we even get town meeting to undo the damage of the tree bylaw, it's going to happen after the vote. So town meeting's meeting 2 weeks, 3 weeks later than May 5th. So I don't see how that can work anyway. Second thing is, because you're presenting a balanced budget and they're going to be voting on something afterwards. Second thing is, even if we remove sustainability and double it to 600,000, that's still less than most streets that are listed in the engineering's 25 through 28 or to 2030 plan. There's not, almost not like any street, even High Street, that comes in at 600,000. They're all much more expensive. Just treatment of pavement, no bollards, no special painting, no new curb things for parking, nothing, just straight going. So I'm sort of thinking, what does Aaron really need to get the street pavement going for the FY27 to FY30? And where else can we, if this is the most important thing, more than sustainability, more than eventual solar power savings 5 to 10 or 15 years from now, what is the actual need that the town has over the next 3 years that we need to share with the community who's going to vote, so they understand that these things they've been asking for, like not just pothole filling, but new streets and broken sidewalks, is actually going to happen like in our lifetime.
Well, I mean, you can look back at Aaron's presentation to you early on in this process, right?
Yep.
The estimated cost to keep the roads as they are, not to make them better,
right,
year out basis is $8.1 million, and that's just for the roads. That's not the sidewalks, doesn't include any of the other stuff. So really, when you're looking at that, it's closer to between $9 and $10 million a year
for 2 years. I'm looking at the one she gave to the select board last month or something, March 18th. Oh, that's a year ago. And at that time it was about $4.5 million a year just for roadway maintenance and rehab. You're right.
Right.
Okay.
And what I would say is, right, that's her budget. That was the kind of budget for that work. That was what she was then. But to actually get to the level of service that you're talking about, it requires even more than that. It's a require.
Correct.
So, we are at a point where we are doing our best with the resources we have, but to truly put that ask out there, I could put an override together that is just roads. I can cut all. Correct. And I could put, one a big fat roadway override proposal out there, and that's kind of what we did in 2023, right? We put $2 million of the $4 million of the $5 million the town got towards roadways, and that investment is just starting to bear fruit now because in addition to that, the select board then changed the policies on complete streets that has unlocked the ability to do more preventative maintenance and repair work without having to consider, do I need to put a bike lane here? Do I need to put et cetera, et cetera. And we're still getting data about how that is progressing. And so when Aaron and I talked about this, would we like more money for roads? There's always more money that can be spent on roads. Always. We could spend tens of millions of dollars on roads. But you run into a capacity issue. Eventually you are not going to have enough people to manage the projects, and you will have you'll have a bottleneck there. And two, you've changed two significant things in the last 3 years. You've put in a significant influx of new money into the CIP for roadways, and you've loosened the restrictions on how that money can be spent so that more projects can be done. And so given those two variables, when looking at the balance of what she thinks she needs, considering the Department of Public Works holistically, it's Aaron's position that you can always give me more money for roads. I'll never say no to that. But what I want is to keep sustainability. What I want is, and what the community wants, in her opinion, is the work that sustainability is providing. So given those competing preferences, the commissioner's preference is that we keep sustainability. And I think that's the kind of question here. With that said, it is subject to a political valence, right? To the point that John Doggett made. People want to see, what are you doing about the roads? And it's easy to point to the override and say, hey, see, here's money for roads in it. That's an easy point there to make. It's harder to say, well, we just changed our policies and we added money 3 years ago, and it's complicated, but you're going to start to see it happening. You can so that's a harder sell.
Chaz, if I
even the 325, you'd have to put in a clear narrative to the town that is really so little that people shouldn't expect, if they approve the 325 or something, that suddenly something major is going to happen. That's like that's like 40 feet of a roadway or 400 feet. It's not significant, Chaz, and so I'm not dissing what you said at all. God forbid. What I'm saying is that amount reflects maybe 0.03% of what Erin needs, you know? So to make a thing in the, I mean, what John and Janet and I talked about, John and Craig also, about removing that whole row and replacing it with roads, was because when you look at even the 600,000, it's such a small amount of any single portion of a road that people in the town should not think or be confused about how little that will help. And then within that, the question is, sustainability is on a lot of people's minds. I get it, but for a certain point of view, maybe there's an aspirational piece to that, that pothole repair, smoothing and painting of streets does not have the same sort of aspirational, you know, future view. It's a here and now, bumping down the streets. People need it fixed.
I think one point has come out of this for me a little clearer from what you said, Chaz. And that is you might already have a bottleneck in terms of doing more projects. Therefore, it seems to me that what would be a good thing here is not, I don't know what the amount of money is. It's less than 300,000, however, and that is to have a position that gives more bandwidth for more streets to be done, since there is a budget of significant amount on the books. And so therefore, maybe that's the answer, that we actually need some relief, which actually would make sense to the voters, that we're putting emphasis on it, not because 600, everybody knows that 600,000 doesn't buy a lot of street, if one, and therefore, but if somebody who is pushing on the progress along, and that we are that dedicated to it, and therefore the amount of money necessary for that is much less than 300,000. Maybe that's the solution. I don't know.
Okay, the other John had his hand up, but you saw this thing? No? Okay.
I took it down, Bernard. I think these comments are all very, very, very important and get at. I just, actually, now that I am speaking, I'm just going to say something about Cliff. I agree with Cliff. I think whatever we decide is the right way to go. That should be decided at the full committee level. And I never saw the work of the town committee as being aimed at saying this is what should be in the override, or this is not something that should be in the override. I saw it as being aimed at making very, very clear what the what the circumstances are that lead us to having a deficit between, you know, our expected revenues and our desired services, and what the options are for closing that gap. And then the discussion at the level of the full committee begins. And in that sense, I very much agree with Cliff's point of view.
Okay, Dick?
Thank you. One thing that concerns me is that as we look at, and this discussion, I think with Cliff and John and also John really highlights the fact, and Chaz, is that we are looking at an all or nothing situation here. If there's an override, this will happen. If there's no override, this will happen. The parade of horribles. And I think it would be useful. I've certainly advocated that the select board think about a tiered override. And it's, I think, very difficult for this body to say, we would pick tree protection, we'd pick sustainability, we'd pick roads. But I think that to truly provide service to the voters and to increase the likelihood of an override passing, I think that there should be an option that is provided. And I think that it would be something along the lines of the town saying, look, if we get our 5.3 million, this will happen. If we only get 75%, this will happen. If we get 50%, this will happen. And you've already told us what will happen if we get 0%. Same thing on the school side. If we get 18 million, this will happen. If we get 15 million, this will happen. If we get 12, if we get 9, this will happen. You know, with some level, some options along the way, rather than saying it's either all or nothing, which is, I'm afraid, where the dialogue has gone to this point. And I think it's ultimately up to the town administration and the school administration to say what their priorities would be at those different levels, rather than this group purporting to do that. Thank you.
Chad?
Yeah, I agree with Dick. Before Chaz presented his version of tier 1, 2, and 3, when we started talking about tiering it, my question was, who decides goes in what tiers? Because I don't think it's us either. The town subcommittee, I hear what you're saying, Cliff. I agree with you. I think what I originally wrote was more in line with that. We had a discussion because of concerns about roads and picked a place that I argued against for probably close to an hour and a half, saying that ain't the place because of potential future savings and certainly a vote of town meeting that says we want X. That being said, I think, all we can do is say, we think this is the amount, or this is what we think of the amount that was presented and the way it was presented. And then this whole committee, whatever we come to, in my mind, the select board and school committee in the town school partnership should have had this discussion before we started, so that we knew how much money was on the table. Certainly for the schools, it would have been clarifying to know this is as far as we can go. And that to me is the place we should have started, but it's too late to go back there. And that's just my humble opinion.
Hey, other discussion? So, John, I take it that your summary, or your executive summary, is really what should go in the main report as opposed to what's in there now, and call it executive summary, which is, the history of the committee, who's on it, etc.
Well, the executive summary just is a summary of the report. Right. So what's written in the report is what drives the summary. So if what's written in the report comes out, then it won't appear in the summary. Or if it's changed, it'll appear in, it'll be changed. So
I think it's a small matter.
So I think the question is, what should the report contain in it? And not what the summary was automatic. It will adjust itself to the new report guidelines.
Okay.
I don't know because I lost track of what was being sent. There was originally an executive summary that Jesse wrote, which was for the full report, that I had at one point forwarded to Sadaf and Sergio when he was in town so they could include it. And I had a question, should we take this out here? But I didn't have John's report yet to substitute. So if you're talking about this is how the committee got started, blah, 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 that part can come out of ours and start with what John wrote as the executive summary.
That's
Is that your question? Yeah, okay, we can fix that.
It's a small matter, but
when I spoke, Chaz, when I spoke with Sadaf 2 days back, she clarified with me that she and someone else, I think it may be Cliff, I'm not 100% sure, Sadaf, you can correct me, but she and someone were partnering to write the fuller report, which would then include both the town subcommittee and the school subcommittee recommendations. And then beneath that would be the town's report from our subcommittee, the school's report from her subcommittee, and all the appendices, pictures, graphs, resources, and documentation for people who want to go deeper. So there'll be a heading one that Sadaf and her partner are doing, followed by sections that then have the fuller report that John and John worked on, and then the school's report, so that people who want to go deeper can.
Right.
And then we'll have an opportunity at our next couple of ERC full meetings to review where Sadaf and her colleague, I think it's Cliff, are going to be heading.
I think the term you're looking for is minion.
I could use that too. Yes. one of her little friends is going to help her. There you go. Yes, of course.
So Jen, and then the background section, yes, will be just part of the master report. So I think maybe Cliff, sorry, Jesse, you and I should just talk about how to merge these.
That's
with
yeah.
John.
Our next meeting, yes.
Okay. All right. Great.
Yeah, that was our plan, and to see this thing come together as a master framework in the next couple of days, literally, like maybe before the end of the week, and then we can start working on that big draft together.
Okay, amazing.
Make sure that this, yep,
Yeah,
that's the
because what
plan.
I'm doing on my side is I'm pulling together all of the different sections of the school report. So in the next day or so, I should have a formatted version that we can then merge together.
To Dick's point, I know that it's been talked about a lot by a number of folks, and if the group ends up after its discussions turning to the select board as one of those options and saying, okay, let's go back to 2008 or one of the other overrides where people had choices, right, in terms of levels that they were going to vote for. I do think that work sort of needs to be happening, even if it's behind the scenes.
Sure.
So that it's not a surprise, and that it's going to be able to be produced when the select board needs to look at it.
Chad?
Yeah, I can say on this is that I've done this exercise. I know what I would cut if I was asked to do so by the select board at various levels. The reason why I'm not putting it on the table is because then it will be asked for. Because I don't want to create the impression that those cuts are somehow livable. They're still pretty brutal. We're already in this cutting framework, and we have already gotten ourselves down to the bare bones of things. And I know the schools have been doing the same thing. So I don't want to be in a position where we're asked to put that on the table, and then, that's then taken as, oh yeah, somehow this is going to work. Like the way a lot of it balances out once you get below 5.3 is you really start trying to string yourself along in ways that are unsustainable. You start going back to the reserve fund for fire over time. You lose things that people, care about and are going to gripe about and are going to have political impacts on this whole thing, like library hours, like the farmers market. It becomes below 5.3 million. It starts to become a self-defeating exercise. That's not to say that I couldn't do it. It's not to say that I haven't done it. I have done it. But I am reluctant, especially if we're the only ones doing it, to give a roadmap and have folks say, see, you can cut more. If I have to cut more, I'll cut more. I just think the level of service that would be provided at a level below this is going to be to the noticeable detriment of the community. And so, that's why we've done the work that we've done with this committee in terms of trying to show you how much more departments could potentially ask for. That was the work over the summer of introducing you to the departments, showing you what it is that we do on a day in and day out basis, is because we're already doing so much with a budget that strains every dollar. And I know the schools will tell you the same thing. Maybe and the response from members of the community will be, well, continue to do more with less. And that's the direction we're given, that's the direction we'll take. But I would not want to do that exercise here now in public without the schools being asked to do the same thing, and without the community understanding that below this line, you can expect consequences that are unsustainable in the long run.
Hey, John, let's go to.
Oh, thank you. And thank you, Chaz. Yeah, a lot of us have been talking about this question of a tiered question, and I think we have to be very careful as to what we mean by a tiered question, because there's different ways of doing, choice A, B, and C. And one of the ways that, I happen to think is not advisable, and at heart is kind of cynical, is that you put certain things in A that you think probably are not very high priorities for anybody, but then you say the things that are in B, which they really want, they can only get to B by first approving A, So if you approve A, then you can vote on B and you can approve B. In other words, it's, structured in a way that deprives people of the choice of saying, all I really want is the stuff in B, And so I think we have to think through very carefully, and we will do that, I'm sure, at the select board level. But bottom line of what I'm saying here is, I think those kinds of decisions can only be made at the select board level ultimately. And that everything else that happens at the subcommittee level and then at the full committee level in terms of the ERSC, is informative and recommendations. But then those recommendations, are handed to the select board to make what will be very, very difficult decisions as to how much to ask for in the deluxe package, how much to ask for in the mid-grade package, how much to ask for in the economy package, if that's how we're going to do it. Maybe after all of those discussions, we'll decide there's only one way to do this, and that's to say we don't think that the override ask can be as big as the people who want it to be really big, and we think it needs to be bigger than the people who want it to be really small. And so, you might end up at the end of the day saying it really only makes sense to just state our priorities clearly in one question. I don't know, and I'm still thinking through all of these, as I'm sure a lot of people are.
Okay, so that.
So thank you for everyone's comments. I want to respond to a couple things. The first is that as Cliff and I draft this executive summary for discussion with the broader subcommittee, the plan is to put forward some options for this group to debate. And that might include tiers. There's, an option of just having a single question, right? So we'll try to tee that up for discussion with this group on Monday. So that's the first point. The second, Chaz, is in response to your question. I don't think the implication was that the town would be the only one who is being asked to make cuts. If we did look at a haircut, for example, across the board, which again, I don't know that we would land there. That's still something for us to be discussed. My expectation is that we would have to look at that more holistically across the town and the schools. And I also want to acknowledge that similar to what the town has done, from what I've seen, the schools have already made significant cuts, and a lot of the additional opportunities are longer term, right? Things that have been discussed around healthcare or salaries, things that don't happen overnight, right? Which then puts them in a bit of a different realm. Or to the extent that, there are short-term cuts, they're not a lot of them, right? It's not going to change what you put. It's not going to materially change what you put on the override question. So I think there is, more work to be done. And what I do think this group needs to think through is what we think will pass, right? And make a recommendation and an assessment in the options that we present to the select board. And that's why that question gets raised. Because even in the tiers that were shared yesterday, Chaz, and I appreciate you doing the legwork on this, in tier 1, that reduction that is taken to bring that the overall number down is only taken on the school side. And I don't think that that's a reasonable request of either the town or the schools. And so that would need to be looked at across the board. That's it. Thank you.
Jesse?
You're muted, Jesse.
Jesse, you have your hand up?
Of course I do. I just didn't find my mute button. Sorry about that. First, I wanted to thank Charlie Young before when I spoke for letting me into the meeting, because all I could find across all my emails was only nothing for this meeting. So he got me in through a call to the select board office. So thank you for that. Number two, in this discussion, it is my understanding, per careful listening to Chaz over 2 or 3 months now, that even what we're talking about is not going to solve our recurring deficit. Is that correct, Chaz? At the end of 29, we're still where we have now, which is going to need our override, because we're just going to have enough money in the town stabilization fund to make it 2 years, 1.4, 1.4, after whatever we do in 27. And then the schools are basically putting something forward that if we were able to give them, let's say, I don't know, 266 at 14 million or more, if they get all that money plus the 5 from the town, we're up at 19 or something. That's only going to get us 3 years, and we're going to be right back where we started. That's the second thing I wanted to say. The third thing was that if we're pretty like rock solid on not changing the town allocation, which is now originally was 1.9, now it's about 1.74. And Bella showed us at the school committee last Thursday night how they brought it down a little bit, but there's still, 4 million or something in there somewhere. And after this, what you do is you start to take failed override options by FTE, which will range somewhere between 22 currently to 88 or something, FTEs taken out of the schools on a failed override. And you start to ask yourself, if the town has absolutely no more flexibility and the town school partnership is not going to split the money differently to break up that gap, then I don't think, in looking through everything that we're going to be talking about starting at 6 o'clock tonight on the failed override side for the school budget, that there's any hope of us getting closed in without either making the override really large or only asking the schools to take future failed override cuts and bring them into now to reduce their overall exposure. To me, that's why I'm thinking, and I sent a message last week and ended up publicized before I was ready, but it's okay. We're all friends. In that I said, we need to think about even the town taking some quote unquote failed override opportunities now, so that there maybe is more money available through the town school partnership in some meetings of theirs, like Janet mentioned, to bring the money up a little bit from the 1.74 to maybe 3, asking the school, which was at, has come down to somewhere get in the middle. So we're only a few 100,000 or $1 million apart, and then find another way to close that so we can actually operate. Right now, if I take Bella at her word, which I do, and I've studied it pretty carefully and listened very carefully and listened to the meetings I had to miss very carefully. It's like bare bones now. There's not a lot you can do unless you're going to start cutting teachers, blowing up sections past the DESI threshold, which could be done. I'm not saying not, but it's a huge, huge navigational change for the schools to start, blowing sections up by taking FT teachers out of the equation. And I'm heartened to see just this afternoon in Brookline News that the the school union is, proffering a 1-year negotiation contract with a lot of flexibility in terms of trying to meet the goals they need, but also understanding the issues we have. And so my question, if we're not going to close the school gap by raising the town's allocation, if it's stuck at that 1.74, I don't really care what's happening for the 6 and 6 in 28, 29. We're going to have a huge problem just this year, because we're either going to have to ask for a hell of a lot of money adding in those 2 years. So we're starting with a base of around 12 or 13 million. 5 for the town is 18.5, and then a couple more if we can't take some failed override opportunities from the school side and failed opportunities overrides from the town side, and then use that to at least close the gap for this year, so we're not blowing this override number up into the low 20 millions, which would make it like a state record. So those are just some, comments I have, and that even though the 5.3 has been published, and you said, Chaz, even this afternoon, that you'd be able to provide additional targeted surgical cuts if required, that wouldn't cut all services, but certainly make the town operate a little differently. And I respect the difficulty where those decisions would have to be made. But at least from the town subcommittee discussions we've had, that might be one direction we want to look at to somehow bridge creatively that 1.74 that the town's offering to the schools, and how low the schools can get before they really start to fall off a cliff.
Chaz?
I appreciate the the comment, Jesse, and I understand where it's coming from. I think there's just one matter of semantics and phrasing that I think is really important to emphasize here when we talk about the town allocation, because I keep hearing this from the members of the school committee and sometimes from members of staff. And it really grinds my gears, because what is driving the low amount of revenue that the low increase in revenue that the schools are getting is not the town being miserly. It's not the town saying you get less. It's the shared costs. It's the above the line costs. We are getting less, right? Like, we're in the same boat. We're suffering right along with you. The way that the town school split flows means that if there is less money up top, you and us both get less money. And so I think it's really important, as we talk about the drivers for why we are where we are, to avoid language that suggests that somehow the town is choking the schools, because that's not what's happening. And
I don't think, I'll just break in for a second. I don't think, nor did I mean, God forbid, to make it sound that way in an accusatory or a litigious or an us versus you kind of look as well. I've never used that language. What I said is, I was tutored by you, and you taught me that the last 3 years of money that the schools got were because of the 23 override. And I agree with that, and Bella heard it from you and has said the same thing. The gap we have this year is because there's no money left. I get it. I've heard that from you many times. I believe it. The question is going to be, with all the effort that we put in for a year now in ERSC, we're at this point a year later, and we've got a significant multi-million-dollar gap to close just the FY27 budget. And the question is going to be, the schools have tried really hard to get, respectfully, a significant decrease, which will affect services, but not blow up the class sections. On the other hand, the town has also offered, a bunch of FTEs, or there was 12 or 14, I don't remember exactly, 8. But the thing is, there are concessions, decisions, agreements that the town side's making as well. At the end of the day, we just need to agree as a full committee as to where is that gap closure going to come from. And I'm not trying to in any way to say the town hasn't done its part, and I'm not saying the school hasn't done its part. But we as a full committee in these discussions, Bernard, have to come up with a creative, workable solution to balance our budget while closing that gap for FY27. And so, I mean, Chaz, if you misunderstood me or if I said it in a different way, I'm sorry. But I think I'm with you.
I didn't take
Right.
your.
Okay, thanks. So just wanted to make sure, because I'm careful.
It's just a matter of then how it's perceived by the broader community, because
Got it. Okay.
then I get it back from people, like, why are you doing?
Well, yeah, I mean, 100%.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay, thank you.
Dick, are you trying to talk?
Yes, thank you. I certainly did not want to suggest, Chaz, that this look at possible tiering be only on the town side. I think it has to be on both sides of the ledger. And I think my thought is that some issues are not yes or no. It's not, do we have a sustainability division or do we not have a sustainability division? But what if we have a smaller sustainability division on the town side, for example? And on the school side, there's been a statement, I think, that if there's no override, class size will increase to, say, 25. What if instead of an $18 million override, there's a $13.5 million override? What will class size be then? Will it be 23 instead of 25? Are people willing to accept that? What would it be at the different grade levels? Recognizing that you want smaller classes in the younger grades rather than the upper grades, and you tolerate larger classes in AP courses than in other courses because that seems to work better. It's, I think, on both sides of the ledger, what I'm trying to say is it's not necessarily an all or nothing situation where there is no override or there is the full override. ultimately, I agree with John Van Scoyac that it's a decision the select board has to make. It's not a decision that this committee will be making.
Just, Dick, that number was a little bit on the low side. Actually, we're at 25 in some now, it would actually go to 30. And then it'd be an increase of over 50% from FY26 for K to 8. So it's much bigger than that number. DESE is like,
Okay.
DESE's like big number top is you can't go, they're recommending not to go past 24 to 25. In some sections we're there now, failed override would be total staff reduction of 210 FTEs in the school, 14%. And
Right.
besides cutting programs, your K to 8 class average would be 30.3, which is a 56% increase. 36% of the classrooms in K to 8 will be closed. That's the
Okay,
failed override. You know how draconian it is.
Thank you, Jesse. I think my point is that
Yes.
that a lot of these issues exist on a spectrum. They're not all or nothing, and that's some thinking that ideally will be done.
Got it.
Sure. Thank you.
Cliff?
Yeah, a few things. First, Chaz, I was not suggesting, by the way, that the town present any sort of a list. We're the schools. What I said was that really it was a suggestion to the select board that they instruct the town administrator, apparently he's already done this, and the school committee and the superintendent to prepare a list of how they would prioritize things in case it got to there. I agree. I don't want to see that list. All right. I don't think it's appropriate to show that list at this point in time. Or that this group needs to evaluate a list like that. So I wanted to make that clear. Obviously, I agree with Dick that things are on a spectrum. I do want to say that I know the schools are going to be coming out with something this evening that's going to be in an all or nothing scenario, extraordinarily drastic. I also want to point out the conversation that was held on Monday at the school subcommittee, where the topic of how things were presented last week at the school committee in terms of numbers have been produced for 27, but not for 28 and 29. And comments that were made then about how you reset a base and carry it forward accurately and appropriately. I will state that I do not believe that in the last 46, 48 hours, that sort of analysis could have been done fully and accurately.
Okay, Val?
Val might have to be promoted.
Oh, God, Charlie?
Yes, thank you for flagging that. I'm on that now.
Thank you.
Hi, Cliff.
Val, you've been promoted.
Thank you. I just want to respond to what Cliff said. We did take what you said at school subcommittee to heart. And in fact, Susan, Mariah, myself, and Bella have worked tirelessly for the last 48 hours in getting that analysis done as much as is feasible at this point in time for out years, right? And have conferred with Melissa on the town side with respect to the push and pull between benefits and paying out unemployment. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
Okay, do we need to do any further discussion of the town draft report? Apparently not. What's the summary working document?
I believe there are two different versions. So what we looked at, I had the draft as I prepared it, submitted it to the subcommittee over the weekend so that John could draft the executive summary. He also edited it So one of the documents you have is my red line of, these are the changes I've made since the last time we shared a document. And John's blue line of, these are the changes I'm making to what Janet did. It is very difficult to read that document, especially when you get down to the chart at the end that summarizes this is what's in the override and what it's going to buy, or the impact of it. It's almost impossible to read between the red and blue lines. So John created a document where he accepted all of the changes. And I had suggested that be the only one that we send to this full committee so that you didn't have to deal with the red and the blue. And the only point of contention in that document, as John accepted everything, was what to do about what was in the DPW request, which I think we need to go back and talk about tomorrow morning. So if you, that's the difference between the two documents. The substance is the same. One is fully edited according to John with everything in there accepted, and the other is, this is what he had to look at, and this is what his changes are. Does that
Okay.
clarify for you?
Yeah. Okay. So we're finished with this part of the discussion.
Yeah.
I see John Stroik has his hand up.
Well, you just said it, Bernard. You don't need to really concern yourself with that summary document.
Okay.
The two documents that were voted on by the town subcommittee are the draft report in full, which has been updated so that it's a clean document. It doesn't have red and blue in it, and the executive summary. Just those two.
Okay. Do we want to vote on the draft report, which would include the executive summary? Are we ready to vote?
My understanding from John Doggett was that there was more work to be done on this.
Yeah, Bernard, I think it's incomplete. We've got a couple of issues outstanding and some suggestions coming through from Sadaf and others, and Dick and so on. So I think these all ought to be incorporated and agreed to in the committee before we resubmit it.
I think it would be helpful, John, then to just understand when you think it'll be back here, just so we can think through next week, given everything we have to do.
I'm not sure whether there's a meeting tomorrow.
No,
we need to.
no, that was canceled because we don't. Sorry, it's John Manscoy speaking. We need additional information if we're going to do anything other than what we've already done. And so we're going to have that meeting, as I understand it, a week from tomorrow.
You can also put something on the calendar for Tuesday if you want. We can talk about scheduling offline and see if you want. Yeah, that might make sense.
Yeah. Well, I was hoping we could schedule that, and it's not important that I have to be there, but I can't be there next Tuesday, and I let people know that. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important that we meet the town one more time. If it's not tomorrow, then next week. Without John, so be it. But there are things to discuss as Sadaf presents us with, the framework, structure, scaffolding for the big report. And so we should keep one in the, so Chaz, yeah, we should keep the one on the 10th should stay there for towns.
Yeah.
I suppose Janet and I spoke a little bit today. John and I spoke a little bit today, JV. That's right. If we have to keep on the conversations 2 at a time to move forward without OML problems, so be it. Thanks.
Yeah.
But it does require that the town get back to us on some of the questions that we've asked, and that will potentially introduce delays, as some have happened over the months, where we can't really meet without the data. So if the data requests have been made, as John VS told me, and we're waiting for that in order to make better decisions, then whoever on the town subcommittee is willing to discuss those before next meeting, will do that.
And quickly, Jesse, if there is going to be a meeting Tuesday, I'm going to leave it to, say you or Janet to make sure to work with staff to get that on the agenda, on the town calendar. And so on.
Yeah, I can take that over for next Tuesday back.
Yeah. Okay.
I believe we scheduled the meeting, or did we just do Thursdays?
You just did Thursday. We'll put on Tuesday. We'll get you set.
Okay, good.
Okay, thank you, Chess.
Okay, other business, tiered override document. Do you want to discuss that or?
I think
We
we've got,
covered it.
we've covered it, but
Yeah.
if there are any additional comments or thoughts, we're happy to entertain them.
Okay, seeing none, and that's the end of the agenda. Unless someone objects, I'd like to end the meeting. Thank you.